Emergency pod alert. While the dust settles on the NHL trade deadline, we're picking up the pieces for the impact on your fantasy squad on the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Ooh, baby. Marchand to Florida. Rantanen cooking up storms in the dust city in Dallas. So much to talk about, and we'll break it all down for you on today's show. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Buckle up, hockey heads, and here we go. Joker voice. It's the latest edition of your daily 30-minute source for fantasy hockey news, NHL breakdowns, and of course, every episode wrapped with our big-time betting segment. It's a Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Steal and Flip. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, where new customers that place a $5 bet and win get $150 back in bonus bets. Check out FanDuel today. Giddy up, Mr. Roden. There is so much going on in the NHL right now, and it's still trickling in. We're recording this episode Friday afternoon. We're still awaiting word on a number of trade packages to be finalized, but we got the meat and potatoes covered for you because there is fantasy fallout all across the league. And honestly, I'm going to turn it over to you. I swear in a second, this is one of the more exciting trade deadlines in recent memory. Rantanen, we're going to get there. Marchand, of course. The Senators bolster their forward group with Cozens and Zetterlund, and a whole lot more. And tomorrow we're going to follow it up. Back-to-back episodes, starting with the big trades and getting down to the nitty-gritty. And tomorrow, a full slate of betting breakdown for the 10-game board steal. That was a preamble and a half. Over to you, because this Mikko Rantanen situation, 8-year deal, $96 million contract. There's lots to cover with this situation.
What a day it was. NHL trade deadline frenzy. One of the best days of the year, seeing all the action go down on March 7th. I've been tuned in since this morning on Twitter, watching on the news, on the radio, TV, everything, keeping my eye out for these trades. And what a deal it was between the Carolina Hurricanes and Dallas Stars. And we're going to talk about the Carolina Hurricane side of things, but the Dallas Stars swung for the fences and they land the hottest unrestricted free agent on the market, Mikko Rantanen, and sign him to an 8-year deal. I mean, This is unbelievable. To me, the Dallas Stars just catapulted themselves to the favorites for the Stanley Cup moving forward from this point on. So what a trade it was. Just to break down the full trade, the Dallas Stars acquire Mikko Rantanen. In return, the Hurricanes acquire Logan Stankoven, 2 first-round picks and 2 third-round picks. So pretty good, a pretty good and big haul in return for Mikko Rantanen. But this Dallas Stars team has just put themselves at the top of the National Hockey League. The team they have formed is unbelievable. They have a contender for the next 5 to 10 years. They've got Rupe Hintz locked up, Mikko Rantanen locked up. They extended Wyatt Johnston today as well on a 5-year, $8.4 million deal. Miro Heiskanen, Jake Ottinger as well. A few years from now, they're going to have to lock up Jason Robertson too. This team is legit. I feel a lot more comfortable with Mikko Rantanen now on the Dallas Stars than he was with Carolina. When we talk about fantasy value-wise, I think he's going to blossom really good there, play strong hockey in Dallas. Again, there's a lot to break down from the Carolina Hurricane side of things, and the whole reason why he didn't re-sign with the Avalanche, if that was the deal they were offering. Same thing for the Hurricanes. He finds his place, and he's in Dallas for the next 8 years.
So many different angles that we could cover.
Yeah.
You jump off the page for me, number one. What is this going to mean for that top 6 forward group in Dallas? Because now some minutes are going to get eaten into a little bit, right? Like, there's obvious positivity all over the board. And this makes Dallas, by the way, now they're the second favorites for the Cup at plus 600.
They should be the first.
Only the Florida Panthers at plus 500. We could probably have a little discussion about that. We have episodes to come. We've got Waiver Wire Monday, which perhaps after this deal is going to be the most important Waiver Wire Monday of the entire season. So make sure you're stay tuned for that. And tomorrow's Saturday special. We're wrapping up everything. Mikko Rantanen, Roope Hintz, Jason Robertson now form easily a top 5 trio in the NHL. And I think what I see from the Dallas Stars here, shout out to Jim Nill. You know how I like to give front office execs some love. Throw
GM
him in
of the year after this.
Throw him in the mix with the Bill Zitos of the world. You know, we love Billy G. There's a whole bunch of astute GMs. This guy just once again takes a good team even better. And I think what they've realized here, Steele, of falling short over the last number of years is look at the major teams who have won cups. You know, the Avs, the Panthers, any of the teams, even knocking on the doorstep, they have that one line that is just elite. They're absolutely loaded. And now the Dallas Stars definitely have that with Mikko Rantanen. So I think everyone's going to really focus in on this Dallas situation, which is fair and obvious. But what are the Carolina Hurricanes doing? I just needed to get this off the chest. This episode might be a little bit longer before we get to the other topics, but, you know, we have to talk about it because all of a sudden, we were talking about peripheral pieces there. We're talking about fantasy value in Carolina. We're talking about what Mikko Rantanen would do for Sebastian Aho. This is a concern now if you own pieces of the Carolina Hurricanes because not only has this been a lot of shuffling, this is just going to be really hard for the team's morale. After getting Rantanen, the highs of that, they're playing really good hockey right now. He doesn't want to stay, and now he gone. And you bring in Stankoven, which is, you know, okay, I don't hate that move. But it's not Mikko Rantanen, and I don't know what this team's going to do down the stretch here. Should they still be a playoff team? Yes, but I'm very wary of the fantasy pieces that we're getting a boost with Rantanen in play that will not have that.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange thing from the front office in Carolina. I mean, you trade away Martin Necas and Jack Drury with picks. You go out and acquire Mikko Rantanen, one of the top goal scorers in the league, and unfortunately, you're not able to convince him to re-sign and extend in Carolina. So you have to get something done. So at the end of the day, I actually really like the haul Carolina brought in. They bring in a young player with skill in Logan Stankoven, 2 first-round picks and 2 third-round picks. That's a pretty good deal for Mikko Rantanen when all things are all said and done. But at the end of the day as well, this doesn't help them win now. They could have kept Mikko Rantanen on a rental just for the rest of the season, for the postseason, potentially win a Stanley Cup and still continue to work on a deal before July 1st. It's strange in that sense. Sure. This doesn't help them win now at all. It doesn't help them win next year. It doesn't help them win in 2027. So it's definitely strange, but obviously if he's not going to re-sign, you just gotta weigh your options. Do you want to play for a Stanley Cup and know just going to be a rental for the next 2 to 3 months? Or do you trade him away and get a big haul in for the future? And I think that's obviously what the Carolina Hurricanes decided to do. And I believe they still have a lot of faith in their offensive group to get the job done in Svechnikov, Aho, the blue line, and of course their goaltending duo.
And don't forget my boy, Canadian gem, darling of the Four Nations.
Seth Jarvis, baby.
Seth Jarvis, my guy. 78 points for the Carolina Hurricanes, smack dab in the middle of the Metro, very much alive. Before we get to Marchand, before we get to the Sens, the Avs, and a whole bunch more. Very quickly, I just wanted to throw this out there. Mikko Rantanen, 1.13 points per game this season, is the highest point per game player dealt at the trade deadline since 1994. Joey Juneau, Steele. I was only 6 years old, and I barely remember that player. Stud for the Washington Capitals after being traded. That's a very intriguing move. This doesn't happen. I said it to you right before we went on air, and boom, it hasn't happened since 1994 that a caliber of this type of player, fantasy or otherwise, gets dealt. Lots more to talk about. Let's quickly drop it, and then we'll get to it after the break. Brad Marchand. My goodness me. Might as well, look, is it a Dallas Stars Florida Panthers final? Should we just chuck a couple of bucks on that now, Steele? Because that's not a bold take. And I'm not saying one player and a guy in his, now aging to mid to late 30s is going to absolutely solidify a team as a cup winner. It will solidify them, though, as one of the toughest teams in the league to play against. They already were that. Paul Maurice, they're tight checking. They don't lose stick battles. Tough work along the boards, hard on the forecheck, and you throw in the little ball of hate. I'm excited for your take on it after the break. Fantasy or otherwise, the Florida Panthers are plus 500 favorites for the Cup. We hope that we continue to be your favorites on the rest of the episode, covering all of the NHL trade deadline news that's impacting your fantasy squad. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on fourth quarter comebacks, you stay in the action the whole game. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine the live bets into a same-game parlay. Steele and I have been hammering the same-game parlays, and we'll have a fresh one for y'all on tomorrow's episode. So tune in and tap into FanDuel, where right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 wager hits. That's FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
It's NHL trade deadline day. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast edition of NHL trade deadline day. The fantasy value that has shifted and moved around from the West to the East and everywhere. And we got to find out again, what's going on with the Florida Panthers? What's going on with this deal for Brad Marchand? The information, the deal is not fully out. We do know that Brad Marchand was traded from the Boston Bruins to the Florida Panthers. We don't know what the Bruins are getting in return. It's to be determined, but it's definitely a little bit of a shocker to see the inside division trade. I mean, the Bruins traded with the Buffalo Sabres. They traded with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They traded with the Florida Panthers. I think, speaking for myself here, I did not expect them to be this big of sellers at the deadline, especially after Trent Frederick. Surprising in that sense, but even more surprising that they're dealing inside their own division and to a team that is a bit of a rival over the last couple of years to the Florida Panthers.
It's kind of shocking, actually, Steele. It's straight really up shocking. And I think just what we've been saying for the better part of 3 years is actually now coming to fruition. The downfall of the Boston Bruins is here, and it's real. And I think, honestly, a lot of that, aside from like the makeup of the team, contracts, and otherwise, this is indicative to me of the front office in Boston, once again, just after 2 decades, perhaps, of foolproof, bulletproof, everything proof type moves. Again, maybe an overreaction because they're still 64 points right there in the mix. Or maybe it's more indicative of what the Islanders, Flyers, Canadiens, and Red Wings have done around them to really look pretty good over the last couple of weeks. And maybe they're like, we ain't got it. And that could be the case too. Brad Marchand goes to Florida, and right now, Steele, playing with Sam Bennett and Evan Rodriguez on the second line is going to be a really tough line to handle when you also roll out Barkov and Reinhart on the top line. I think Paul Maurice is going to have an absolute field day with deploying Brad Marchand, a player that fits the Paul Maurice mold to a T. Will it work out long-term? You know, the contract, the age, all of that. This team has clearly been in win-now mode. And I think because of the flurry of moves, we've maybe forgot that they already added the biggest name out there in Seth Jones. This team is once again positioned to not only make noise, but if they don't show up on the Eastern Conference Final or more or bust, it's a huge disappointment in my opinion. They're built to win. I'm looking at if Evan Rodriguez sticks on this line, Steele, that now has a whole other wrinkle of nastiness and offensive capability. That is a little fantasy gem, diamond in the rough, that I might be going out there and adding Evan Rodriguez right now and see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. We also got to keep in mind Matthew Tkachuk on the long-term injured reserve. So his full contract of $9.5 million, whatever it is off the books right now. So going into next year, it's going to be interesting about trying to extend or re-sign Brad Marchand at that point, depending on what the what the cap is and what the overall cap salary they have available is. But value to be had, I think, again, looking at what the standings are in the Eastern Conference, looking at their own team within after trading a couple of days before as well, seeing that Charlie McAvoy still injured, seeing Brad Marchand week to week. Maybe they just did look at themselves and be like, this might be the year we finally slip outside of a postseason spot. And they were massive sellers. We're going to continue to keep our eyes on all of the trade news and information, especially this Brad Marchand deal when it fully comes out. Another big trade, though, in the Atlantic Division between the Buffalo Sabres and the Ottawa Senators. The Ottawa Senators actually made a few deals, but the big one on the day for them, they acquire Dylan Cozens. I'm trying to find it right here. The Ottawa Senators acquired Dylan Cozens, Dennis Gilbert, and a 2026 second-round pick. The Buffalo Sabres acquired Josh Norris, Jacob Bernard Docker as well. So big trade for the Ottawa Senators. They finally shake up the core that they've been going with over the last 4 to 5 seasons. Obviously a tough day for Brady Tkachuk, who addressed the media, you know, a guy that he grew up with in Josh Norris. He's known him his entire life, got really emotional in his media availability before practice or after practice it was. But obviously, yeah, it's tough to lose, you know, obviously your closest friend, but it's a business move and he understands that. And this gives them an opportunity to get a little bit tougher. And obviously it's been a really bad season or a down season for Dylan Cozens, but the Ottawa Senators wanted to get tougher. They wanted to get grittier, more physical, and overall just that's what Dylan Cozens brings to the game. And the potential for him to kind of blossom out offensively too after a down season in a new scenery gives him that chance in Ottawa.
This is a really intriguing one for me, Steele, and this is kind of like a classic hockey trade. Two very good roster-worthy players that I think actually fit very similarly into like a second line role. They're not the number one guys, but they're a really nice number two option, both of them. I'm actually looking at Josh Norris in this trade. I know a lot of people are going to talk about Ottawa. They're going to talk about all the other things going on trade deadline for obvious reasons. The Sabres aren't as sexy. I think as much as the Josh Norris, Brady Tkachuk angle, and he was drafted there, and all of that's nice. If you're talking about a team for a young guy who might need a little bit of a reset, and I know he's been better this year, Josh Norris, right? He kind of blew the doors off the league, that 35-goal season in 60-odd games in his second full year in the league, and I was starting to call him, you know, a 40-plus goal man. 20 goals this year and really looking better. And there's still the injury concern fantasy-wise. Yeah. I think there's no better team to perhaps reset with than a really good young offensive group where you can make it your own. And I think that Josh Norris here is going to get a great opportunity to slide into the Buffalo top 6 and put up points quickly. Did he get that opportunity in Ottawa? Sure. Are they a better team? Probably. Yeah. So maybe this is a tough sell. But for me, I think this is an opportunity for him to really make the Sabres his team in a sense. And I think that's going to translate into some really big fantasy value down the stretch here. Does it happen in the first game or two? Maybe not. But I think down the stretch, Josh Norris is a very good kind of high-risk, high-reward situation for me. But I really do like what the Ottawa Senators did by also adding Fabian Zetterlund into the mix. That second line in Ottawa is now starting to look very attractive as well. So maybe go out there and get yourself a little piece of Fabian Zetterlund because he will be out there.
Yeah, and I'm also maybe a little bit concerned about Drake Batherson to begin with and what it means for his fantasy value. Obviously, has been a little bit inconsistent at times through the season, and that second line is going to be completely new to him. Fabian Zetterlund and Dylan Cozens now making that, you know, so-called projected second line right now in Ottawa. So there might be some adjusting to get into with Drake Batherson to learn the games, but obviously all skilled players. And I also like that deal for Fabian Zetterlund as well. Josh Norris going to Buffalo. Again, I think that was the main concern was the injuries he's dealt with over the last couple of seasons. Fresh change of scenery for both those young stars in Ottawa, in Buffalo. Also, after the break, more trades to talk about. The Colorado Avalanche also making a big splash over the last couple of days. They are filling that center depth role right now. Brock Nelson, Charlie Coyle as well. We're going to break that and big time bets when we come back after the break. And welcome back to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen every single day, Monday through Friday. 7:00 p.m. is when you can find our episodes right now. 7 a.m. going into next week. Again, make sure you're staying tuned in for tomorrow, Saturday's special. We're going to continue breaking down all these trades. We're going to get to the Toronto Maple Leafs, Brandon Carlo, Scott Lawton trades. We're going to talk about everything you need to know fantasy value-wise for everything that broke down on NHL trade deadline day. But the Colorado Avalanche also made a big splash, maybe not as big as the Dallas Stars with Mikko Rantanen, but they go out and they address their center concerns. They trade with the New York Islanders. In return, they got Brock Nelson and William Dufour, and the Islanders got Callum Ritchie, a 2026 first-round pick, and a conditional 2028 third-round pick. So they bring in Brock Nelson, a 30-goal scorer. He's 33 years old from the New York Islanders, but they also go out and get Charlie Coyle and a 2026 fifth-round pick from the Boston Bruins. In return, they give up Casey Middlestat, William Zellers, and a 2025 second-round pick. So I like this from the Avalanche. I'll throw it over to you. Sure. First initial thoughts on the Brock Nelson trade and what this kind of meant for the Colorado Avalanche in that tough Western Conference.
First initial thoughts in general, Steele, is this roster has seen a lot of turnover in just one season. 2 new goaltenders, new blue liners, a whole bunch of new forwards. A major face of the franchise is gone. You got Marty Necas in there. This is a situation that to me is going to shake out 2 ways. This is an early first-round exit because things aren't just going to gel quick enough. I don't see that happening, or this is a deep cup run, Steele, because I think this team is more – look, you got Cale Makar and Nathan MacKinnon. Is Mackenzie Blackwood the Stanley Cup goaltender that he needs to be to carry this team at points? That's a big question for me, and I think that's the main question mark. So my initial reaction is this team is immediately much improved. Is there a whole ton of like jump off the page fantasy value with guys like Charlie Coyle and even Brock Nelson? Maybe not right away, but Brock Nelson and Valeri Nichushkin is an interesting little combination that I want to keep my eye on very closely. Number 2, when I look at this back end, I forgot that they also added Ryan Lindgren, Steele. So this is a really good top 4 pairing. You've got Devin Taves and Cale Makar, Josh Manson and Lindgren, Mackenzie Blackwood in there backed up by Scotty Wedgwood. This team looks a whole lot different than it did even a couple of weeks ago. So for me, I think immediately you want to kind of run out there and say immediately auto add Brock Nelson. You know, this is huge for him because now he's in a real offensive-minded group for sure. But he was sad to leave New York. He wanted to stay. He's a longtime Islander. I don't know if you saw that clip. So is he going to immediately gel and jump off the page? I would say, tranquilo, be patient. I don't know exactly if it's going to happen. Should this mean good things for the Colorado Avalanche in the standings? Most definitely. But I don't know if it's going to jump off the page for Brock Nelson. I just don't know, given how long he was in New York his entire career and how much he wanted to remain an Islander. I could see there being a couple of days of, you know, some blues, perhaps some emotions here before he really settles in. So just be wary and keep your eye on it. Charlie Coyle, I like it peripheral. Don't see a ton of value there. My eyes are double peeled on if Nichushkin and Nelson can form some chemistry.
Well, look, it's NHL trade deadline day. Everyone's going to be emotional that gets traded at the deadline at this point. And obviously for a guy who's been with the team for his entire career, I mean, even Brad Marchand probably feels the exact same way, but you're going to a Stanley Cup contending team. And I am all in on this Colorado Avalanche team right now.
I agree.
If it wasn't for the Mikko Rantanen to the Dallas Stars trade, I would actually have the Colorado Avalanche as my number 1 Stanley Cup contending team right now. Right now they're behind the Stars for first. I really like the additions of Brock Nelson and Charlie Coyle. Obviously, with Coyle, you're not going to get as much fantasy value on that third line right now, centering Ross Colton and Logan O'Connor. I still think there's fantasy value to be had, but not so much as Brock Nelson. And it still actually might be tough to go out and get him. I believe he's somewhere around 60% on Yahoo, maybe a little bit lower on ESPN, maybe higher as well. He kind of fluctuates from time to time. True. I like this. I think he's going to play well. Jonathan Drouin's been in control of his game. The confidence is at an all-time high. He's putting points up left, right, and center right now. Valeri Nichushkin, we know what he can do when he's playing at his best. I think Brock Nelson is the perfect addition. They get all the center depth in those 2 guys. They also bring back Eric Johnson on the blue line, so he'll be back there in Colorado from the Philadelphia Flyers too. I just have so much faith. Martin Necas is absolutely playing out of his mind right now with Nathan MacKinnon. And when you have, to me, the best player in the world today, Nathan MacKinnon, the best defender in the world, and Cale Makar. You also throw in these new guys that they've acquired over the season as well. I think the Avalanche are a very dangerous team. And that is a good point that you made about this could be Stanley Cup or bust, because they might be playing against the Dallas Stars in the first round of the playoffs. So one of those teams could be heading home in the first round. Hopefully we get that matchup eventually. If not in the first round, it's going to be fun to watch. But for me, the Avalanche, I'm completely sold on them. I love what they did this trade deadline.
Colorado Avalanche now sit at plus 900, the fourth lowest odds to win the Stanley Cup behind the Oilers, Stars, and Panthers. I actually think that's a little bit disrespectful. I think they should probably swap places with the Edmonton Oilers. It should be them in there as the third favorite. Panthers, Stars, I could see them as the two favorites. I'm fine with that. Maybe flip-flop those as well. But the Colorado Avalanche at plus 900 right now, Steele. After we get off this episode, your boy hit a little bit of a parlay last night. That might be catching a little bit of my money at plus 900. A 10-piece? Why not? For fun? We'll talk a lot more about it. I also forgot completely that Jake Wallman is now an Edmonton Oiler. That is a very little interesting tidbit that I think we should cover on tomorrow's episode. Bets, the Leafs, all the other trades that will be impacting your team. I'm very excited to talk to you, Steele, about our boys in blue. Lawton, Carlo, we'll see what happens. We'll talk about it on tomorrow's episode. What a juicy trade deadline day, though. I'm fired up.
Big time bets. Let's rattle off these 3 picks for Saturday. Lots of games over the weekend. And I'm going to just keep it straight to the point here. I'm going with some, I'm going with some heavy favorites. First pick of the night. Got to go with the Tampa Bay Lightning on the puck line at home at minus 108 against this Bruins team. The Bruins, for obvious reasons, big sellers, completely depleted right now. I'm going to put a lot of faith in Vasilevsky and that Lightning group at home. That's the first pick. Second pick, I'm going with the Florida Panthers, also on the puck line against the Buffalo Sabres. Defensively, the Panthers have been incredible. Sabres have just been very bad, obviously, all season long. Puck line for both the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. And my third and final pick, I'm going to take the Dallas Stars on the money line against the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers barely squeaked out an overtime win against the Canadiens the other day. The goaltending's been shaky. Offensively, they haven't been there. And with this new addition of Mikko Rantanen, I'll take the Stars on the road at plus 104 after this deal. So those are my 3 picks. Lock of the night, Stars money line.
I love all of those, Steele. As a little tease, I'm going to leave my Saturday picks for tomorrow, and we'll break them all down on tomorrow's episode. I will throw out a late night Friday pick for fun. The Anaheim Ducks are at home to the St. Louis Blues. They're getting paid plus money right now at home, and they've been really hot. You know how I feel about the St. Louis Blues. So if you're looking at a little loosey-goosey parlay, I like the Jets on Friday. I also like the Ducks at home, and I'd even throw in there the Alex Ovechkin anytime goal at home against the Red Wings, a team that he has dominated. I could see fading the Devils hard down the stretch here, Steele. So the Jets on the road looking to play a little bit better. This could be one of those situations that it's a steamroll spot. I'll break down all of my Saturday picks on tomorrow's episode, along with all the rest of the trade news that you guys need.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. For your second listen, got to check out the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, from your boys, Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden, we appreciate all that love and support. We wish you good luck with all those bets tonight. We wish you good luck with those weekly matchups. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow for the Saturday edition of the NHL Trade Deadline Day.
Peace.